every ministry is important, and I think it's not fair to run down any portfolio, run down any ministry, particularly a ministry which touches the lives of thousands of people, as textiles does, as HRD does. But it's very clear that whatever be the importance of textiles, the fact is that till yesterday the Prime Minister and the entire BJP was swearing by her handling of HRD, despite mounting criticism from all quarters, all stakeholders. It wasn't just rebellious students who can be expected to protest against ministers regardless of what they do, but university and various institutional administrators, senior bureaucrats. There was a sense in which she was rubbing everybody the wrong way and being rather aggressive and, as you put it, inefficient in the pursuit of whatever agenda she had been given by the BJP and the RSS for higher education. So while yes, textiles is important, and I'm hoping that she will do a fabulous job there, and I'm sure that she will do a better job than Mr. Gangwar. But there is no getting away from the fact that she has lost HRD because of the perception that her performance was not up to par. Okay. And there's no way to prettify that, there's no way to window dress that. This is a reality. You may not want to use the demotion word. Mr. Mittal, who I respect a great deal, is technically right. Smriti Irani remains a cabinet minister, so there is no demotion in terms of rank. But there is a message that her handling of the ministry is not what it ought to have been. After all, there were plenty of other ministries that the PM could have chosen to look at in order to energize or invigorate the government. He didn't do that, right? He chose HRD for this shuffle, and that reflects badly on Smriti Irani's handling. There's no question about it.
Abhishek Singhvi, Smriti Irani's replacement is Prakash Javadekar, who's got a spectacular promotion to cabinet rank and to a ministry that was earlier held by people like Narasimha Rao, Murli Manohar Joshi and Arjun Singh. How do you respond to the view that this is a reward for his clearing the obstacles and the logjam created by Jairam Ramesh and Jayanti Natharajan at Environment, which was impeding development? He cleared the mess Congress left behind so effectively, he's been promoted.
Karan, if you allow me, I'll answer both the questions, starting with Javadekar first and briefly on Smriti Irani as well. On Javadekar, I think I would phrase it like this. Yes, he has been rewarded, but not in the manner in which you are putting it. He has been rewarded because he has cut through a whole mass of safeguards and committees created within the environment sector so as to hasten, expedite and deliver environmental clearances. Never before in the history of India has the Environment Ministry become such a fast clearer of projects. As it was rightly put by many Environment Minister predecessors, this is a ministry where to be unpopular, to be slow, to be hasty, to be careful, to be cautious, to ask questions and to be unpopular was a good thing. The BJP, when it came in, made it very clear that they wanted quick, very quick clearances, and he has done his master's bidding, especially in sync with the PMO. And apparently, if you don't question the PMO much, this government rewards you. One brief sentence, I think Smriti Irani, who is a very articulate minister and a very effective speaker, has also inbuilt a certain aggressiveness and confrontational attitude, and the whole tenure is actually marked by milestones like Rohit Vemula, the Kakodkar resignations, the banning of the Ambedkar Periyar study circle, the general fights over Sanskrit and German. So everything has become a very confrontationist thing, even down to the letter addresses Dear Smriti Irani or Dear Miss Smriti Irani. So I think that is what has really led to her undoing, otherwise quite capable and articulate a minister.
Let's move Sudhanshu Mittal to two other cabinet ministers, Venkaiah Naidu and Ravi Shankar Prasad. Mr. Naidu has lost parliamentary affairs but gained information and broadcasting. Mr. Prasad has lost communication but gained law. But the question is this: has Mr. Naidu suffered because he was unable to get GST passed and effectively handle the opposition in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha? And has Mr. Prasad suffered because he couldn't control coal drops, a problem that the PM seemed to be particularly concerned about?
Just one rebuttal to what the allegations Mr. Singhvi has levelled against Prakash. Prakash Javadekar did cut through the maze of stoppages which were created by the erstwhile ministers. So no less a person than Rahul Gandhi himself had to refer to the Jayanti tax. So if somebody cuts through the corruption which was perpetrated in that ministry for getting clearances, I think he should be lauded and not condemned.
Okay, now,
and let me also tell you that
now,
what
Mr.
he managed to do was
Mr. Mittal, let's not get stuck on that. Come to the issue I raised.
Required to come were not.
Come to the issue I raised.
Okay. Now, as far as as far as the other things are concerned, first, law is a critical ministry, and in the past you have seen that there were such major judgments which required a different kind of application. NJAC is one of them, where in spite of a unanimity in polity, you've had the Supreme Court striking it down. So a lot of things which are happening may not, as the polity believes, be as per the constitutional provisions, but it is judicial activism. So in light of all this, there was a very critical requirement of somebody very senior handling that ministry, and Ravi Shankar Prasad, as you know, has earlier been a law minister.
What about Mr. Naidu losing parliamentary affairs?
So critical requirement was law, and so he has been given law. And again, see, if you look at it, there's been a lot of media bashing against this government, which we feel as a party or as a government that which is not a fair media bashing the government has been receiving or the party has been receiving. And it again required a very committed application. Arun Jaitley ji has been doing not only management of the finance ministry, but also a lot of political management.
Can I
His hands have been so full.
Mr. Mittal,
and in order to just concentrate on this,
your explanation, Mr. Mittal, for why Mr. Venkaiah Naidu has been given INB suggests that Mr. Jaitley was unable to handle the media bashing the government was facing, that he wasn't up to the task and someone better was needed. In other words, Jaitley wasn't good enough at INB, a better man was needed to handle the media bashing.
No. Not at all, Karanji. On the contrary, we all know how effective he is vis-a-vis the media. I mean, he has been the most articulate of all people we have in BJP, plus his relationships and all, and he has been able to put forth the government's point of view very effectively.
Okay.
But again, you know, at the end of the day, it is 24 hours. So you have to prioritize, and the priority today, given the economy, I think that's the greater priority, and there was a requirement that he should wholeheartedly concentrate on the finance ministry, because so much is happening, such fast changes are taking place.
Except for the fact that the government believes, I won't go on further with this, but I just want to point out that the government believes the economy is working perfectly and effectively, and he doesn't need to devote all his time to it, but never mind, I'll accept that argument. Siddharth Vadra-Rajan, one of the loudmouth ministers who repeatedly embarrassed the government with his tweets and annoyed the press by calling them prostitutes was General V.K. Singh. Now, he's lost independent charge of statistics and program implementation, and all he is now is a simple Minister of State at the MEA, and that post he shares with M.J. Akbar, a new minister. Would you agree that V.K. Singh has been punished?
I will do no better than to quote what Sudhanshu Mittalji said, which is that the definition of a demotion is if you were in a certain category of ministership and you are then relegated to a lower form. So V.K. Singh held an independent charge portfolio. He no longer does. The message is very clear that he has been demoted. You know, MEA, quite frankly, needs not 2 but perhaps 3 ministers of state, such as the volume of diplomatic business that they transact and the demands of protocol activity that more ministers are needed. So I don't think V.K. Singh should begrudge having to share space with M.J. Akbar, but it is very clear that there is a loss of status. What I am a little puzzled about is why the Prime Minister has chosen to act against him now. Shortly after V.K. Singh made his horrible remark calling journalists prostitutes. We can all remember the words of praise that Prime Minister Modi had for him. So it's not as if Mr. Modi has signaled his displeasure in the past or even today. It's not clear why he has done this, but
can I interrupt?
The fact is that VK Singh has been taken down a peg or two. Yes.
Can I interrupt? Mr. Modi also tweeted his words of praise of Smriti Irani when he said of her speech in Parliament, Satyamev Jayate. So
Indeed.
Mr. Modi praises people and then
Indeed.
chooses the right moment
Indeed.
to remove, demote or shift them. But coming back to VK Singh, Siddharth Varadarajan, he's an army chief. And army chiefs don't like being demoted or punished. Is there a possibility that he might tender his resignation?
Well, we know that this particular army chief likes a lengthy innings. He went to court against the previous government which was trying to enforce his age of retirement. So my sense is that he will not resign at this apparent slight. I should note in passing, if I may, with your indulgence, a line that I used in my column on Cabinet Reshuffle, where I said how VK Singh was the minister who was very aggressive in his demand that the name of Akbar Road be changed. And I said he didn't succeed in getting Akbar Road removed from the streets of New Delhi, but he has ended up with a roommate sharing office space with somebody called Akbar.
Absolutely.
That is the fate of this gentleman.
Absolutely. The irony of the situation is delicious. Now, Abhishek Singhvi, the other demotion, and I'm deliberately using the word demotion. I'll come to you in a moment, Mr. Mittal. I'll come to you in a moment, Mr. Mittal. Don't worry, I'll come to you. There are only 3 people on this show.
One explanation on this.
I'll come to you, sir. Don't worry. I'll come to you. Just let me bring other people in. The other demotion, and I'm deliberately using the word demotion, although I know that Sudhanshu Mittal will once again technically disagree with me, is the treatment of Sadanand Gowda. And this has happened in his case for the second time. This time round, he's been moved from law to statistics and program implementation. Earlier in November 2014, he was moved from railways to law. I mean, clearly he's a man, no matter where you put him, he doesn't live up to the Prime Minister's expectations. Shouldn't he have been removed altogether?
Well, clearly, Karan, though he's a decent man, and I don't like to speak ill of anybody, but I mean, he has clearly not been the right person for the right post. First of all, point number 1, very high expectations of railways from the beginning, and he was the wrong man to be appointed to railways. Secondly, even before Mr. Gowda, from the day 1 of this government, Law Ministry has been in shambles. There has never been a more confrontationist ambience with the judiciary. Major cases have been lost repeatedly, and law has been relatively in the doldrums. So Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, who is a competent lawyer, hopefully he will improve things better, because he didn't have much time in the first term. But as we speak, law has been a failure as a ministry, and therefore Mr. Gowda has been a failure as a minister there. Thirdly, and very quickly, I think clearly Mr. VK Singh ought not to have been there in the first place in the Council of Ministers. Perhaps he should not have accepted a Minister of State, even independent charge, having been the army chief. Thereafter, not one, not prostitutes was only one of them, but continuous litany of controversies. So it's very, very late and not enough which has happened.
Sudhanshu Mittal, many people believe that there was a clear case for dropping Sadanand Gowda altogether and possibly dropping General VK Singh, not just demoting him. And he, by the way, has been demoted even by your standards of what would be a demotion. He's fallen to the bottom of the 3 categories, having been in the middle. But the Prime Minister hasn't dropped either of these gentlemen. And the question I want to ask is this: how is it that a strong, assertive Prime Minister, and this cabinet reshuffle stamps his authority very clearly, can't wield the axe to drop people who are poor performers, and in this instance of VK Singh, people who continuously embarrass the government? Why can't he drop them? Is he not tough enough to do that? I mean, personally rather than politically.
What may be embarrassing for you or for the other 2 gentlemen may not be embarrassing for the government. Mr. VK Singh has to forego his this thing. his portfolio, not because somebody else had to replace him, because it has been elevated to the level of a cabinet minister. So the analogy which you want to draw out of my statement is a fallacious analogy. You see, the portfolio he was holding has been elevated to that of a cabinet, to be held by a cabinet minister. So please let's not look at that from that perspective. What secondly about Mr. Gowda? Mr. Gowda has been the Chief Minister of Karnataka. He's a very experienced man. As I said, there is a new focus on the ministry, which is program implementation and statistics, because the way census has been happening in this country, the way programs, the way there's a new impetus on how we got to monitor all the projects and all the programs. So what you are doing is you are undermining the jobs which have been interested in terms of the relevance which this government is looking at in these new formats. So I mean, the debate is on a very predictable lines of political castigation because of the personal biases. And as far as prostitute is concerned, do we all realize that today on the social media it's become the norm rather than the exception, for the simple reason that that's what this society today accepts as an address.
Can I ask you a question there?
I mean,
Mr.
yeah,
Mittal,
being on the other side of this again, you all be very upset about it.
Can I ask you a simple question? Would you call Siddharth Vadra-Rajan and me, both of us are journalist prostitutes?
Sir, are we talking about the rule or are we talking about the exceptions?
I'm talking about propriety.
About the rules and not the exceptions.
I'm talking about propriety of language from the mouth of a minister.
I am talking about exceptions. Sir, you and Mr. Vadra-Rajan are exceptions to the rules. So let's not use exceptions to justify.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mittal.
You know, the unfortunate part of the story today, as it stands in the eyes of the social media, is that there is lack of credibility in the entire media system.
All right. I note that you think there are exceptions. You don't call prostitutes. That clearly suggests you look upon most journalists as prostitutes. And I have to point out, Mr. Mittal, the journalists will not be happy. I had thought that you would be an exception and you would not call any journalist a prostitute. You sure you don't want to rethink that?
I haven't called any, sir. I haven't called any. I have said the social media believes this.
Okay.
I have never. That's not my physiology. I don't use it. But I'm giving it the context of the social media.
I note the important sentence. It's not my phraseology. I don't use it. I thank you for that. Unfortunately, it was General V.K. Singh's phraseology, and he did use it, and he used it repeatedly. But let's leave him aside. Siddharth Vadra-Rajan, another curious change is what's happened to Jayant Sinha. Some people believe he's been punished either because his father was critical of Mr. Modi and repeatedly so, or, as the Times of India today claims, he's been punished because he himself was indiscreet and was guilty of the impropriety of introducing his wife, a fund manager, to top bankers and finance ministry officials. But in contrast, today's Business Standard suggests that in fact the move to civil aviation could be a promotion after the civil aviation policy was recently announced, which has expanded the horizons of that ministry. So what's your interpretation? Punished or promoted?
Oh, my sense is unambiguous punishment here, because if indeed the Prime Minister believes that civil aviation is a high-flying ministry, so to speak, and that Mr. Sinha is a capable person who has proved his worth in North Block, then Mr. Raju could have been moved to some other ministry, and you give a young minister like Sinha full charge. So I think this doesn't wash, quite frankly. There will be and all kinds of attempts made to spin this, but the fact is that it looks as if vindictiveness has trumped any assessment of performance, because if you talk to stakeholders, it's very clear that Jayant Sinha had a high reputation and was seen as somebody who was an able deputy to Arun Jaitley. And the question that comes to my mind is whether this is in some ways a veiled attempt to further weaken Mr. Jaitley. He already was unable to protect Raghuram Rajan. Mr. Mittal has questioned his ability to manage the media, so to speak, which is why somebody like Venkaiah Naidu has been brought in as I&B, and then you have a capable deputy like Jayant Sinha rustled out without any valid explanation. So I think that this is one wrinkle in the thesis that this reshuffle is all about rewarding performance and punishing the laggards. This was one move that does not fit into that matrix.
In fact, let's come, Abhishek Singhvi, directly to where this reshuffle leaves Arun Jaitley. Now, he's lost INB. In addition, he's lost a minister at the finance ministry that he got on with rather well. Now he has to contend with two new faces as his ministers of state in the finance ministry at a critical time when, in fact, those gentlemen will be new to the ministry altogether. And on top of all of that, there is the widespread belief that he's not as close to the Prime Minister as Amit Shah, or even as close to the Prime Minister as he used to be. Has Mr. Jaitley overall lost influence in this reshuffle, even if he hasn't lost status?
Well, I think any answer to such a question has to be subjective and to a large extent speculative. I can give you my view.
Are you saying that because you're a fellow lawyer not wanting to be critical of another? This codicil is very interesting, the way you give your answer.
You haven't heard my answer yet. You haven't heard my answer yet.
Go ahead.
You will then realize why you're wrong. Clearly, Mr. Modi owes a great debt of gratitude to Mr. Jaitley for a long, long time. He's been his biggest, strongest supporter and has been a spokesman of Mr. Modi more than a spokesman of the BJP for many decades and years. That debt cannot be written off so quickly. But net, the answer to your question is, in my opinion, I underline, and it is subjective and unambiguous, yes, that there is some loss of power. Because if you remember, when the cabinet was first made in 2014, Mr. Jaitley was not only a very, very senior member of it, but he was very much a part of the choice of ministers. Many ministers were chosen by Mr. Jaitley virtually, and I have been very unambiguous about it. I have given a bite in an article where I jokingly said that I told him in Central Hall of the side that though I don't want to say it openly in front of your BJP friends, ab ki baar Jaitley sarkar to nahi hai. Now, from that scenario, today's scenario is a little different. From that scenario, today's scenario is a little different. Because obviously, a vital ministry, and INB is a very, very important ministry for Mr. Modi, has changed. Some of the people who he was comfortable with, I'm not